Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Carnes. Today, we're going to talk about the formulas. So formulas for Service Cloud reporting in Salesforce. We'll just do a quick introduction. We'll dive into some techniques and practice. This is a hands-on session. I will show, so Kyle's put into the link a couple of times, or into the chat, the link to the Dōjō setup. Just two quick steps to set up a Dōjō, an org to use, a dev org for this, if you haven't before. We'll talk about some upcoming OpFocus events, and we'll talk about some upcoming Dōjō topics, and we'll take Q&A. So for the Q&A, I think it's fine to just drop questions in chat. Kyle will keep his eyes on it. I'll try to respond as I can as we're going. So my name is David Carnes. As I said, I'm the Chairman and Chief Evangelist of OpFocus. Honored to be part of the MVP program. Really enjoy speaking at events. I dug this photo up from years ago. This is a company that I worked at almost 20 years ago. This is probably 20 years ago now. But I don't sort of, you come up with things to wear for Halloween. I think I lost a bet. I think maybe this wasn't Halloween. We played a lot of foosball, and we had partners with foosball, and I think I lost and had to wear this stupid thing all day. So we also have Kyle Shagnon on the OpFocus team. He's our events manager. Thank you for joining, Kyle.
Yeah.
Great. So OpFocus, we're a revenue operations consulting firm. We work with SaaS companies to scale go-to-market operations. We've been in the Salesforce community since 2006. All right, so if you're new to the Dōjō, this is a place to learn, love to share ideas and experiences. And as I mentioned, there are lots of recordings. Today, we're going to talk about formulas. And I want to start off by talking about operators and functions, probably more functions. As I was even digging in, preparing for this session, I realized that the list of functions, it kind of grows and grows as the years go by. I was talking with an old friend in the Salesforce community last night, and actually somebody I went to high school with, and he was sharing me some old formulas that he'd written related to time for calculations. And it's interesting, I realized that there are some functions that didn't exist at the time that he wrote the formulas. And nowadays, there's some easier ways to do things, and this is through functions. We'll talk about it. We'll also talk about the plumbing that's available for time calcs. It's really helpful to be aware that there are different types of dates, and now there's this whole category of time that Salesforce has added, and there are some additional features we can take advantage of. We'll do 4 different hands-on examples. We'll do which day of the week, which hour of the day. We'll analyze case counts. We'll do it first on a summary report with parent group val, and then we'll do it on a matrix report using parent group val. Before we get started, Kyle, can you throw the poll out there? So what types of functions have you used in your formulas? Have you used date functions before, time functions, logical functions, pre-group val, parent group val? I'm just curious where everybody is. All right, that's probably all of us, Kyle. We're pretty close. So it looks like we've got some new to functions. That's great. Glad you could join us. And before we move on, I'll just mention we did 3 separate Dōjō sessions last year in February and March on formulas. So digging into formulas for reporting. So today's going to be a little bit more specific and a little bit deeper level potentially. You might want to watch those recordings to just have a much more thorough introduction. We did it over 3 sessions. All right, so if you haven't set up your dev org yet, again, this is the org that we'll use. Takes a couple minutes, and the instructions, Kyle will probably drop that into chat again. And it looks like you dropped the survey into the chat there, Kyle, instead of the Dōjō setup. All right, so one thing that I find really helpful, and I found super interesting last night, is this page in help. This has been around for years. It's gotten longer and longer. At some point in the last 10 years, they split it into 2 documents because it's so long. So essentially, it's 3 documents in help. There's an overview that's kind of collapsed, and then there's an A through H and an I through Z separation of all the functions. I just want to show you this before we get started because it's really, really helpful. Like this is how you get the good work done. So if you open up help, clicking on the question mark, you can see in help a page called formula operators and functions. And basically it goes through the 3 different kinds of operators. So math operators, logical, and text. And text would be something like concatenation. Logical would be ands and ors, and math, you get, pluses and minuses and division and stuff like that. So this is kind of helpful because, it's interesting. If you look at the list of operators when creating a row level formula, for example, I think it only includes 7 of them, but there are many more than that available, and they are usable within row level formulas. And you wouldn't know just by using the formula editor. So there are things like, there are 2 different ways to do ands and ors. There are ways to do equals and not equals and stuff like that. So then if we scroll down, we get this long list of functions, and the functions are what do the heavy lifting for us in our formulas. So there are a few in here that I didn't realize were here that could be useful for Service Cloud formula reporting. One of them is called add months. This returns the date that is indicated. That is the indicated number of months before or after a specified date. So, if you needed to do math on months beyond the case open date, something like that, that could be useful to you. You have a whole bunch of them that are related to dates and date times. As Salesforce introduced a data type called time, I think they started going deeper into things like milliseconds and actually giving us hours and minutes to really dig in and parse out the separate parts of a date time value, which could include hours, minutes, seconds, and milliseconds even. So there's quite a long list here of stuff. I clearly can't go through all of them, but so this list there's a really nice summary. If you want to dig down into any of them, you can click on them and I'll show you what that looks like. Just to point out, there are 2 other pages, and I actually find this, maybe I'm just a little geeky here, but I find it really nice to just go through the whole list, right? So what does that mean? This is the expanded list with all the details, and there are really good examples in here for formulas. So I'm going to skip the operators, but if we scroll down a bit, and let's look at the case function. We're going to use this in our first example. So on the case function, this checks a given expression against a series of values. And you can see the syntax here. So it basically says like case of the industry. So this has nothing to do with Service Cloud. The case function is basically letting us compare this value against a series and then specify results. Okay, so don't get confused with the word case and the word case on the Service Cloud. This is just a function that helps us, and we can say, in the case of the account industry, if it's this value 1, like agriculture, then return this value. This was a way to do bucketing before bucket fields, was we'd use the case, but it's really useful. We'll do an interesting example, but here's a nice use case of the case function, for example. So this is the help on operators and functions. It's a really good, useful thing, especially because there are about 75 or 80 functions available in Salesforce, but within the formula editors, you actually don't see that whole list. There might be 25 or 39 of it, but there are more of them that you can use. So this is another reason to keep this out there. All right, so a couple thoughts before we dive into our first hands-on exercise. So there is plumbing available to work with time, and it's really clunky. And actually, one of the examples that I will do today, I'm frustrated with because it's just clunky. So Salesforce has 3 data types related to time. So there's dates, date times, and then there's the newer one called time. And when you go to create a custom field, or when you're going to let's say create a formula field, and you can see these are the formula return types. We have date, date, time, and time. This will impact what the output looks like. So for time, it'll look like 2:40 p.m. or 14:40, etc. When working with dates and time, there are a bunch of useful functions. So 3 right off the bat, today, open paren, close paren, literally the system just yields today's date, now yields today's date and time, and then time now just gives you the time, like it would be 12:14 Eastern right now. Also, there's the date function. You can literally manufacture a date by combining parts, and those parts would be in the form of these other functions. You know, you could either put actual numbers in separated by commas, or you could use these parts, these functions like year, month, day, hour, minute, second, millisecond, and those are all available. Then there's also ways to convert one type of value to another. So if you want to convert something to a date, you use a date value function, and within the parentheses, put your date time perhaps. So if you have a date time field and you need it to be a date, you can use date value. The same with date time value and time value, that you can convert something that's in some other format and make it that particular type. Something that I discovered today that we're going to use today is the weekday function. You'll laugh when I show you what we used to do before that existed. Another one that's helpful is the is blank function. If you're trying to determine, is something not there? Is there no date? So you might use that for escalated. So there is a field that allows us to see the escalated date on a case. If it's blank, we might show that differently or use it differently. All right, so that's some of the plumbing that's available. Let's go into our first example. So this is a real eye chart, this list here, but I'll walk through it. So our support manager wants help planning work schedules of their agents. So they want to see which days of the week cases are most often opened. So we're going to use a row level formula for this. We could also use a custom formula field on the case object. So either one's fine, but since we can create them directly on the report now, so each report can have up to one row level formula. We're going to use the case function for this. We're going to use the date function. We're going to use the date value function, and we're going to use the weekday function. And so these will all be helpful to us here. I already talked about the case function. With the date function, we can manufacture a date. And I think actually we don't even need these two. I don't think we need the date for this anymore. I think we'll probably need date value, but we'll see in just a second. When I started working on this, I was using the old way of doing it. And when I discovered the weekday function, I was like, woo, it's like my birthday or something to find that. All right, so what I want you to do is go ahead and create a report on cases. So let's all do this example now. And what I want you to do is create a report on cases, and then use the case function to assign the day of the week numbers to specific days. And you can see over here that this is what the row level formula will look like on the case report. So I want you to, in your dev org, create a report on cases. And then you don't even have to do anything with the columns or the filters. You can just go to the column pull down and add row level formula. And then within the formula, we'll call it day of the week opened. The output will be text. And then we're going to use a case function. And within that, we're going to use a weekday function. And within that, we're going to use a date value. And we're going to take the created date only field, which oddly is a date time. And we're going to convert that to a date value. And then we're going to use that within the weekday. And weekday determines, is it a Sunday, a Monday, or a Tuesday? But it gives us 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's not all that useful. So we're going to convert that using the case. If the weekday is a 0, then we're going to say that's a Sunday. If it's a 1, it's a Monday, and so on. So in the olden days, including just a couple years ago, we would have written this weekday line. We would have written it as mod date value, blah, blah, blah here. And we'd have to reference a known Sunday. And January 7th of the year 1900 was a known Sunday, and we could use the mod function. Thank goodness we don't have to do that anymore. It's much simpler over here on the right to just use the weekday function. So what I want you to try right now is to, in your dev org, go ahead and create a report on cases, and then immediately add a row level formula. And then Kyle, you might be able to post the, oh, you've already done it. Look at that, great. So Kyle posted the formula into chat, and so you could just copy and paste that into the, in fact, why don't I do that? So I'll do that example. I'll just copy and paste that into so what I've done here is I've created a report on cases, and you can tell it's a report on cases because of the circle up here. That's the report type. And then within that, I've created a row level formula on days of the week. And then I actually grouped the report by days of the week, day of the week opened. And if we just look at my formula here, so what you want to do here is the column name would be something like day of the week opened. The report formula output type would be text. And then the actual formula itself would look like this. Now you may ask, do we need to write it all this way? Do we need to have it look this neat? I would say no. However, it makes it a heck of a lot easier to read it if you have an outer function, and within that you have some indenting. So you see this indenting. And what's nice is Salesforce, the formula editor, is smart enough that if I were to add an extra row here by clicking the return key, the enter key, it automatically indents to the level of the line before. So when you write this formula, go ahead and validate it and then apply it. And then what I would suggest is that we actually group the report by that column, that row level formula. So one way to do that, if I had just created it, I could click on it and drag it up just below the add group. The other thing you could do is just type in the word day of the week, and you'd find it in the add group box. Now, what I want to challenge you, maybe one of you will notice, there's something that I don't want within this output here. So if we look at this, I grouped it by the day of the week, and then I added a chart, and then I made it a vertical bar chart. So when I added my chart, why don't I remove the chart, and I'll just show adding a chart. So now that it's grouped over here on the left, if I add the chart, what I can do is click on the little gear here and make it a column instead of a horizontal bar. But either way, there's something about this that we don't like, we don't want. So I'm curious. So Christopher asked the question, why does Saturday not need a 6? So if we go back and look at the formula, so great question, Christopher. The reason is that the case function, the last item, do you see how these are all nice and organized? If the output of the weekday is a 0, then return a Sunday. That's the text we're returning in quotes, comma, else. So if it's a 1, give it a Monday, 2, give it a Tuesday, etc. After the last pair, there's a final comma, and then there's an else. So it really, with this weekday function, it's the only other option because there are only 7 days in the week. So it's like if it's not weekday 0, weekday 1, weekday 2, then it has to be a Saturday. So that has to be the result. So Tracy asked the question, record count should be times. I'm not sure what you mean by that. The output type would be text on this. The output type would this would be text. And if I close this, the row count is still there, but isn't used in this particular one. So the odd thing with this particular formula is you see that when I add it to the chart, you see that Friday comes before Monday, comes before Saturday. So there's something like, you'll see this with when you create formulas on opportunity stages or case statuses, or suddenly they're just jumbled and out of order. This order is actually alphabetical. So F comes before M, before S, before T, and before W. So that's not what I want. So there's actually another version of this formula that'll solve that. And the way that we can solve that is to just go back and edit our formula and put a 1 dot space in front of each one of the days. And if I go back to, so if I just add in a little bit more, and Kyle, I think so Kyle, I had in that list, that file, there's the next one down has the version with the, you know what, I can even throw it in there. Why don't I just throw it in there since I'm here? Oh, you've got it. Okay, great. So this is just a workaround when things aren't sorted the way you want. You can do this. Tracy asked the question, should we include row counts? And I guess it's up to you. It really doesn't matter. Oh, I guess we have to include the row counts. Sorry, because we have a count of cases. I don't think we can turn it off. So we could toggle off the detail rows if you wanted to collapse this. It's always going to count by something. So sorry about that. The row count has to be there because we're not summing by anything else. All right, so that's so grouping using a row level formula by day of the week open. Let's do another one. And this is what that final output looks like. And you can see that the chart dates are organized the way we want. So let's actually go into one. This one's going to have a problem in it. And the problem is maddening, but it has to do with the nature of these dev orgs. But I still want to show the example. So there are two problems with this. So the output that we want is now that we know which day of the week, it'd be kind of interesting to know which hour of the day have all these cases been submitted. And is there like a witching hour of every day? Is it like between 3 and 4 that we get this onslaught of cases? So management is excited by what we just did and now wants visibility into the hours of the day. So in this case, because we just used a row level formula, let's try a formula field through this one. So we could put it on the layout if we want, a page layout. We could use it through the API. We could also use it on reports. That's the implication of creating a custom formula field versus a row level formula. The row level formula just exists on the report that you created on, nowhere else. Whereas if you create a custom formula field, it consumes one of the 500 that you're given in the enterprise edition per object, and it's usable in other ways. So for this one, we're going to use a function called hour. And this returns the local time as the local time hour as a number between 1 and 24. It's also going to return, sorry, we're also going to use something called time value, and this returns the local time value without the date. Now this data has a problem because of the way it was loaded. So I've created a few cases so I can actually see the real hours. But it's sort of maddening figuring it out. There's another quirky thing that is true when reporting on hours. So Salesforce says in the help that it's the hours that are shown are based on your org's locale settings, but I actually think what it's showing is Greenwich Mean Time. There's another quirky thing that has to do with daylight savings. And so you know, the couple of considerations here, the preloaded data in these orgs doesn't behave correctly. Just that's the first thing. So this is the output of what we're going to create in a minute. And there's a bunch of things that it looks like the date time opened is March 27th, 2021 at 8 p.m., which should be really exciting. And that should yield 20 over here on the hour of the day. But you see it turns out as a 0. So that's a problem. There's another problem that I can tell that I had created a case in my org on March 9th, just before daylight savings. That was at 7:31 a.m. And in the Greenwich Mean Time, that was 5 hours ahead at the time. So then on the 13th, we moved our daylight savings ahead an hour. And I created this this morning on 8:43 a.m. and that showed up as 12. So it's 4 hours from Greenwich. So the problem is these old ones that were loaded from there's 1,600 cases in our system, but the way that they were loaded, they don't do the math correctly. Only new ones that you create do the math correctly. And I can't explain it. There's just junk. There's something wrong with the data that's loaded. So I apologize about that. Before we move on, I do want to point out that there is a setting that I had never discovered before, which is on your company information page. And it basically says improve the date value accuracy for daylight savings time. And if you check that box, it gives you a little warning that says, if you want to do this, great, but it could have some implications. If you have any massive formulas, those formulas might get a little bit larger and they might expand beyond the complexity limit. So there's a 5,000 character, isn't the right word, but it's the word they use, complexity limit when you create formulas. So that's one consideration with turning this on. My org, it doesn't matter. In these dev orgs, it doesn't matter. So we can literally go into setup, check that box, and it's going to help with the DST conversions for the date value function. So the other interesting thing here is we've already gone to daylight savings time, but the UK, which is where Greenwich Mean Time is, has not gone to daylight savings yet. And so it's just sort of this interesting, weird moment in time. We're sort of in the in-between right now. So these are a couple of gotchas. I apologize for them, but let's actually go into the exercise. So what we want to do now is create a formula field. So in our org, we want to create a formula field on the case object. And we're going to use the hour function. And that's what's going to give us the converted time value to 1 to 24. And we're going to use the time value function. And that's going to convert that date time, the created date, into a time format that we can use to then determine which hour of the day it is. So the first thing we're going to do is create a custom field on the case object. So if we go into setup and we go under, so if we click on the gear up in the top right, go into setup, object manager, fields and relationships. And then if we click the new button, so again, under setup, object manager, fields and case object, fields and relationships, and then click the new button, we can create the hour of the day field. And we have on here, you can see it's a custom case field. The decimal places would be 0. We just want the numbers 1 to 24. And we're going to, this is the formula down here. Kyle's put it in the chat. The hour of the time value of the created date. And you need to put the parentheses to get it right. So let's go ahead and try that. And then once you've created it, save it, and then go back to, if you save that last report we created, if not, don't worry about it, just create another case report and display that column. Now, because there's something wrong with the underlying data, you're going to get a bunch of zeros. But if you were to create a new case or two, you'll actually see the results that you expect to see. So I apologize about these orgs. I don't have any control over how they load the data. All right, so I've got the output, and so in my org again, I had created this morning. I created a case at 8:43, and the hour is showing as Greenwich Mean Time. So even though in the help it describes showing as as the company's locale setting, which is set to New York time. And that's what's appearing here. When it does the math, it's showing a 12. Now, my natural thing is, well, we're usually 4 hours off. You know, in this weird window, we're 4 hours off, and then we'll be 5 hours off. So I think we're normally 5 hours off, and I'd normally put a -5 in that formula to get that. So right now I'd have a -4 to have it show the number 8, but I just left it as Greenwich Mean Time. And you can see that the 13th hour, as soon as 9 o'clock came around this morning, I created another case and it correctly put the hour as the Greenwich Mean Time. So all these zeros are concerning. The zeros are because of how Salesforce loaded the data. What I had hoped was that it would interpret this correctly and put 19 for 7 p.m. and 20 for 8 p.m. So just to show you this back in the system, so we create our formula field on the case object. And then if we go back to the report builder, and if I just go in and edit this, I can go ahead and add that column. I called mine hour of the day 2. And I don't necessarily want to see this summed up, but if I go down to the detail rows, probably what I would do is not summarize that. I'd turn off the sum that automatically was applied to it. But so again, most of these are zeros because of the funky thing with the loaded data. But for cases that I created this morning, here are the hours that were added. Probably what I would do to this formula is go back, edit it, and add a -4 to it. Or once the UK goes through Greenwich Mean Time, have a -5. There's only a couple of weeks a year where it's off by the hour, and we're in that weird window now. All right. So that's the hour of the day. Now, something that I thought would be kind of cool would be to come up with a heat map with your day of the week as, you know, create a matrix report essentially with the day of the week as the row grouping. And actually, no, the hour of the day is the row grouping and the day of the week as the column grouping, because you'd want fewer columns. And you could create a heat map of which days of the week and what hours. And then you might use conditional formatting to highlight specific ones based on the number of cases submitted. You essentially create a heat map that way. All right, so we're going to do 2 more exercises. We've got, we want to analyze case counts. So product management is curious about the reasons for cases and their impact on case priority. So we can use up to 5 summary formulas on each report. One quirky thing that's been true forever is they can't reference each other. So you go ahead and create a report, you group it by something, and then you're able to add up to 5 summary formulas. They just can't reference each other. When we do this, we're going to use the row count. This is a special value that's available when writing summary formulas. We're also going to use a special kind of function that's available when writing summary formulas called parent group val. And this calculates the values relative to a parent grouping. So let's go in and dig into this example. So what I'd like you to do is in your dev org, go ahead and create a new report on cases. And I want you to group it 3 ways. And I made this a little extra complicated on purpose. So this, we want to group by origin first, by reason second, and by priority third. And these are all row groupings. So when you create your report on cases, let's go ahead and group it 3 ways: origin, reason, and priority. And then directly on the report, I want you to add a summary formula using the parent group val function. And I want you to then, what that's going to allow us to do is do math across the groups. And so the formula here is row count divided by parent group val, and then in parentheses, the row count, and then the grouping that we want to use, which is the reason. I have 2 other screenshots over here on the right. There are 2 tabs when you create a summary formula. There's the general tab and the display tab. On the display tab, we need to specify which group we're doing the counting on. Otherwise, you're going to get this error here. So if you try to save it and you haven't grouped it, you're going to get this error. And it's hard to know what this means, this error. What you just need to do is click on the display tab and specify the group. So I've got all the ingredients here on the page. Please take a moment and create a report using the parent group val function and the row counts. And then we'll see what this looks like. Thank you for dropping that formula into the chat, Kyle. That's great. And so you can copy and paste that, what Kyle put into the chat when you create the summary level formula. All right, so I'll do this example. I've got the answer here, or what the output looks like on the next page. So basically you have the 3 groupings. So there are 1,600 and I have 1,628, and you might have a couple fewer. You have 1,600 plus cases in your system, and we've grouped them by phone, by reason, and priority. I've also toggled off the details, so it collapses it, makes it easier to look at. Then you can see the percentages over here. So 3 is there one that's easier math? So 21 into 72. Looks like it's pretty close. It's too bad my screenshot doesn't have a nice clean math. I guess 1 into 1, that's really clean. That's 100%. That's an easy one. But so let's actually go into the system and look at this one. So if we just show you so for this example, what we needed to do is create a report on cases. We needed to group the 3 times here: origin, reason, and priority. The reason that I wanted to do 3 groupings is to show you what it looks like to create a parent group val on nested groupings. So this parent group val is only currently applying to priority and to case reason. We could also reference the case origin if we needed to. And then what you do is you come in here, add a summary formula, and you can see what the summary formula looks like. We gave it a name of priority as percentage of reason. The output is percent. I usually use 2 decimal points, but we don't have to. If we get rid of that, it'll just round up. And then we could write our formula here. And just to point out, within the summary formula editor, or all the formula editors on the various types of formulas on reports, we can click on record count, and this inserts row count. So if I came in here and just added a few rows, highlighted this record count, inserted, it just puts in the words for us that are correct. I always get a kick out of record count is different than row count. So probably originally they used row count. But on the functions tab, we can see the list of functions that are available. There are fewer available for summary level formulas in the list, but you can still use others. And then there are the 2 special ones, the parent group val and pref group val. That's what we're using here. If I click on parent group val here, it gives me the syntax I need. It gives me a definition. If that's not enough, if I click on help with this function, it opens that page that we looked at, the operators and functions page we looked at before. So this is basically doing the math, saying, give me the row count and divide it by the parent's row count. And we just have to specify which grouping we're talking about. And then we have to specify the display. I want to tell you guys, I still get this wrong all the time with the display. You have to specify a group, but if you have 3 groups, in this case, I want the grouping to be at the lowest level because I'm saying do the math of priority versus its parent grouping, which in this case is the reason. Okay, so if I go ahead and validate that, that's good. If I apply it, we can see the math here of these rows into the total. Within the preview pane, the math doesn't look correct. So always keep in mind that you can run the report to see the actual numbers. So within the preview, a lot of us are like, oh no, it's not correct, but go ahead and run the report. You can see the actual numbers and we can see the math here. Okay, it's funny, I keep looking at this and going, this doesn't look right, but 3 into 67, so 3 divided by 67 is 4.447, which I got rid of my decimals. It's not the one I want. I got rid of my decimals. I have too many windows open here. I got rid of my decimals so it's rounded down, and you may want to keep the decimals so that you see more accurate numbers. All right, so that was the first one. Let's do one more. So product management is even more curious now about reasons for cases and their impact on case priority. So they have asked about using a matrix report. So when we can use parent group val on a matrix, but there's a little more to do within that function when we use it on a matrix. So again, we're going to use a summary formula. We're also going to reference row counts and something called the grand summary. So that's available to us. And it's one of those things that if you don't know it exists, it's hard to find it. So you can find it in the operators and function page in help. You'll see examples of it. But in the formula editor, I don't think it shows it to us. So you just need to know that it exists. And this is an option. Instead of referencing the grouping level, you can actually say, give me the grand total. So we're going to use the same parent group val function. But you see here that the syntax is a little different. There's a third grouping when you do this on a matrix report. So what I want you to do is basically create another report on cases and group it 2 times, but group rows by case origin and group columns by priority. So we're grouping 2 times, but it's rows by origin and columns by priority. And then I want you to add a summary formula using the parent group val function again, and you can see that function here, the formula here. It's the row count, and we've just added the grand summary, and we've added a reference to the priority here. And then on the display subtab, you can see it over here on the right. Where should this formula be applied to specific groups? And we're actually specifying the intersection between the origin and the priority here. So this one is a little geekier. You know, on Jen Lee's How I Solved This recently, someone in the community, and I don't remember her name, I think her name is Sky. She gave an example of parent group val within a matrix. That was another, just a good example. So this is a nice straightforward one. I'm going to show you, I'll just click off the screen for 1 second and just show you what the output looks like. So basically we have a matrix report of the origins on the left and the priorities on the right. So we've grouped it 2 times, origins by the rows, priority by the columns, and we're doing the math into these grand totals. Oh, this is interesting. I think I actually did this slightly differently than I intended. This is doing the 30 into the 102, but if we wanted to change that and do the 30 into the 533, we'd actually change this grouping here on priority. So I'll show that in a second. So we're creating a report on cases, and we're grouping it twice by origin and by priority, making a matrix report. And we're doing row count divided by parent group val, and then we have the 3 items in here. We're going to change this one in a second, see if we can get it to work. So this is why you have to be careful. And it's funny, as I scrambled to get ready for today, I did this math, and it's perfectly fine to do it this way, but it's slightly different than when I intended, that the math 30 into 102, the percentage is going this way as opposed to this way. So, but we can fix that. So this is probably the hardest thing. A lot of people get stuck. You end up fiddling with the displays with the row groups and the column groups just to get it to work correctly. So let's see if we can fix this one. So just jump back here in the system. I think I've got the last screen open. So this is the one that I had set up. And again, note that in the preview pane, the math doesn't work. So it looks like this, in this case, it is working. 1 into 4 is 25%. So we want to change it so it's 1 into 6 and 5 into 6. So it's the priority against the phone. So let's go fix this one. And I think the way that we're going to fix it is switching up the priority here. Let's see if we can put the origin. Let's see if that doesn't blow it up. So okay, so this is blowing it up. So this is where stuff gets interesting, where you start to tinker. So I might actually come in here and change this from origin. And then we have to have the 3rd grouping in here. So let's see if it takes this. So it took this one. Let's see if the math comes out right. And this is the tinkering that you end up doing. And it's tinkering for which groupings you apply. And then it's also tinkering for the display. And I think this display is what we want. So let's actually see what this comes out to be. And this one doesn't look like it's happy either. So this one is totally off. And this gets into the tinkering bit of, why would it show me that? Well, it's doing what we're telling it to do. So I'm probably not going to fix this one right on the spot. But this gets into, just trying the different values out. And then don't forget that we also have the math that we're doing. So what is the row count? What's the top part of this. And then that's a separate calculation, the row count versus this grand summary that we're doing over here on the right. So I'll send an update out on that. That's sort of funny that I caught my mistake and then I'm not fast enough to fix the mistake. But just as a quick recap, and we can get to some questions, that we talked about the formula operators and functions. That's a page in help. We talked about the plumbing that's available for time calcs, and these are data types that are available on custom fields, the data types available in formula output on reports, and also the functions and operators. There's just a lot of plumbing available. We did a couple of examples, and I botched the last example. So we did which day of the week, which hour of the day, and then we started to analyze some case counts. We have a couple of events coming up. So on April 14th, so our head of service delivery is Neil is doing a session on maximizing your investment in Salesforce. I'd love to have you join that, and you can find that, Kyle, that's at opfocus.com/ oh, look at that, you put it right in chat. That's great. We have some training courses coming up the 13th through the 17th. I'll do a 5-day admin class, that's of June, and then June 27th and 8th, we'll do a 2-day hands-on reporting workshop. And then we have a bunch of events.
My name is David Carnes. I teach OpFocus's platform configuration.
I did that last time too. We've got dates coming up. The next one is April 6th. So we're shifting gears, talking about cleaning up the mess that we all have on our report and dashboard tabs. So we'll look at what's in the folders. We'll create a report on reports. We'll create a report on dashboards. We'll create hidden folders to store, to essentially archive stuff. But we'll talk about that process. And then April 20th, we'll do another session on Sales Cloud reporting. May 11th, we'll do another session on Service Cloud reporting. And then May 25th, we'll do a dashboard makeover session. If you have ideas, or if you have an example of a dashboard that you want to go through a makeover, be fun. Maybe meet a little bit beforehand, one-on-one, and what I could do is recreate your dashboard and then go through, have some fun doing makeovers. So if you want to submit one for a makeover, I'd love to do that. If you have questions, we can go ahead and tackle them. Also, Kyle can throw the Dōjō survey again in the, thank you for doing that. Throw that in the chat. What questions do you have? If you want to raise your hand, we can take you off mute as well. If anyone has some questions. How about you, Kyle? Any questions?
Can I talk? I can. Okay. No questions. I found this one to be extremely informative. I'm always impressed with what you're able to accomplish.
Did anyone, I'm curious if anyone tinkered with this and actually got the numbers. I'm sort of in the weeds at the moment and won't tinker with it and get it exactly the way that I want it. But I'm curious if anyone else did, playing with row count divided by parent group val. So I'm going to spend some more time on this, and I'll send it out to the group of you. So I'll look forward, if any of you have surveys that you want to fill out, look forward to your feedback, and let's take a screenshot of that. But otherwise, why don't we wrap it up for today, and hopefully look forward to seeing you again on April 6th when we do decluttering the report and dashboard tabs. So thanks for joining today. Good luck with your formula writing.
Thank you,
Christopher, thank you for the feedback. That's great. Thank you, Tracy. Look forward to seeing you guys soon. Thank you, Kathy, Natasha.